Hello guys, it's Pete from MyJewelryBrents.com. Today I want to do something different. I want to show you how you can get all the parts you need and all the things that are going to be required to make your own watch. And this is a pretty cool thing. I kind of like it. I'm not going to be using any Swiss parts. We're going to use some inexpensive parts to get started. So let's take a look at those parts now. Well, first and foremost, you're going to have to pick the case that you like. And here I've just picked a clone case, and it is 42 millimeters. I've got the watch movement and the dial. This particular movement is a Chinese movement that I got from a parts supply house here in the United States. You can get this part online, and I'm going to put links in the website and below where you can get these. This particular movement, being Chinese, it did ship. It was running. It was about 30 seconds slow a day. I did do a full service on this movement. And if you go back and look at that freeze frame, it'll give you the hand sizes that you're going to need. You're also going to need to have the correct hands. So this movement has been fully serviced by me since it came in, and I didn't do a video of that. It is a typical watch service. You can tear it all down, clean all the parts, oil everything, and put it all back together and test it. So I will do one more timing once I get it back in the watch just to make sure everything's good. When you order the watch movement, you're going to need a set of hands, and you're going to need, depending on which watch movement you order, you're going to need the correct size hands. These hands are the same size as the minute wheel, the hour wheel, and the second pinion post for this particular model. Make sure that you order the correct hands for the movement that you are ordering. All movements come listed with hand sizes. So one of the things most people don't think about, especially if you're new to watchmaking, is that you will need a dial. Now here I'm going with a black dial. This is just a cheap dial I think I got for $11 on eBay. I did order it. It comes in from China. It took about 2.5 weeks, surprisingly. It said it was going to take about 5 weeks. The dial size to match the case. Now this particular case, being 42 millimeters, required a 31 to 33 millimeter dial. So you also want to know exactly what size dial the case that you like is going to require, and that can be tricky because sometimes nobody lists those. Whenever I make a custom watch, whether it's for myself or a customer, it doesn't really matter which case I'm using. I always replace the gaskets inside the case tube, on the back cap, or in the crown with very good, well-made, waterproof gaskets. There's an important reason for that. Most of these cases are made really well. The part that seals the watch are the gaskets, and the only thing I didn't change on this was the crystal gasket. I'm just going to assume from past experiences that the crystal gasket is good. So you can see I removed the inside pieces, the spacer, and then here's that gasket on the back cover that I am going to replace when I replace the rest of the gaskets. Now one thing I don't like doing is making a clone of a Rolex, because that's just wrong, but you can see these hands I got real cheap from Esslinger, and Esslinger is a good part supplier if you are not aware of them. I just ordered those hands based on the size of the movement. I've got the minute and hour hand, and here is the second hand I'm going to try. I did have a little problem with this hand. You'll see later on in the video. Okay, so the most common with these dials, they'll come in with multiple dial feet, and those will fit most any common watch. So you're pretty lucky there. Again, in the links to the parts that I put in below or on the website will be parts that you can pretty much easily just snap together. So here I'm just test fitting the dial to make sure it's going to work correctly, and then I can determine which dial feet I have to trim off so that I can use 2 dial feet to hold the dial onto the movement. So here on this particular movement, I want to show you the 2 locations on the side of the movement where the screws come in from a horizontal position on the movement, where the dial feet will attach to this. There are 2 screws, one on each side of the movement. I believe they were located like at the 11 o'clock and the 5 o'clock position, and they will just loosen so you can put the dial on. And if you cut the correct feet off the dial, those 2 remaining feet will be screwed onto the movement from the side and will hold the dial in place. Now here you can see I'm just loosening up the screws so that I can test fit the dial now that I've cut the 2 extra dial feet off the dial and polished those off. And once you've done that correctly, you should be able to slide the dial into position. Just be careful not to scratch the surface of the movement. Although this cheap Chinese movement isn't really, something I have to worry about. And this watch is for me, so I'm not as concerned, but I would be taking a lot better precautions if it were somebody else's watch. So now we can see the dial is fit properly onto the movement, and it is time to fit the dial ring or the spacer under the dial onto the watch. And here what I'm going to do is actually, before I get started on that, you can see the day ring is attached with a C-clip, and I'm going to remove that C-clip and remove the day ring since we don't need it. Okay, so with the watch movement becomes a date ring. This is a little ring that sits around the perimeter of the top side of the watch movement, and it elevates the dial above the date ring so that the dial and the date ring don't rub against each other. And this has to be fit in a one way. It has to attach to the dial and the watch in a position where the dial feet can poke through those two little indents. You'll see there's an indent on the top and the bottom of this side, and those actually surround the perimeter of the dial feet. So those have to be trimmed and fit into position. So off camera, what I did was I actually trimmed the dial ring there to hold that up, and I made those little indents a little larger so they fit correctly on the dial. And that's something you can use a Dremel tool with. Just be very careful. You don't want to break or dent this. The one that fits the watch comes with the watch. If not, you'll have to order an entire new one, and that can be a little troublesome to find the right one. But you can see it just kind of keeps a little elevation between the dial and the top of the watch movement so that there's no rubbing between the movement and the dial. And once I'm happy with the fit, I'm just going to get this all put together, and we are going to just make sure the date changes very easily, and this is one way to do it. I just reattach the dial with that dial ring under it, and then we'll screw it down into position, and that will hold the dial and the watch together as a set. From here, I'll do a test to make sure the date changes correctly, whether you do it manually or whether it does it automatically, and from there we can go and set the hands. Okay, so once your watch is pretty much assembled and the dial is attached to it, the next step we have to do is attach the hour, the minute, and then the second hand. And again, these are ordered to sized to fit the watch movement itself. Those specs will be on the watch, either online or wherever you order from. They will give you the hand sizes. So of course the correct way to put the hands on is first attach the hour hand, then make sure you test it. Then I like to center it at the 12 o'clock position. I'll grab the minute hand next, and we will set the minute hand. And this can be a little tricky, especially with some of these Chinese movements. They're not made to the same standards as I see a lot of good Swiss movements like ISA or ETA. Even some of the Citizen mechanical watches are made a whole lot better than these, and those are very good movements, and they're also very inexpensive. But we'll push down that minute hand, and once that's on, then I'm going to do a test to make sure that the hand does not rub against any of the dial indicators, nor do the hands rub against themselves, which could slow down or stop the watch. And we're just going to do one more test around. When I'm satisfied with the hand movement, then what I'll do is I'll remove the stem from the watch. I'll use a movement holder to hold the watch in place, and gently just remove the stem so that I can attach the next step, which is the second hand on this particular watch, and then I can insert the movement into the case. So here you can see I'm using the little push clutch there, and I'm going to gently pull out the stem, and that leaves me with the movement, and now I can attach the second hand. And sadly, after wasting about 15 minutes trying to set this hand, I gave up and I went to my stash of sweep second hands, and I pulled one out that actually fit. For some reason, when I ordered this, it was supposed to be the right size. Again, it poses a problem. Some of these movements just don't fit properly, and I actually had to go for a larger size second-hand spoke so that it would fit on this watch movement. It didn't turn out too bad. I'm not crazy about the orange. I would rather have red, but it looks okay. And moving on to the next step. Again, I like to remove a lot of these gaskets from the watch and put in really soft, good silicone rubber waterproof gaskets. These gaskets that this watch came with are very, very hard and plasticky. I mean, I'm sure they do some water resistance, but I want to make this as water resistant as possible. I don't believe this watch will do much more than a 30-foot pressure test. So I'm not even going to test it. Again, I'm not going to be diving with this watch. It's just a cheap look, a cheap Chinese knockoff. So I'm going to grab some new gaskets from my gasket supply and replace all the gaskets in the watch. And the proper way to measure a case gasket like this is to use a millimeter gauge where you get the circumference of the gasket. And I am going to step this up 1/10 of a millimeter in thickness to a gasket that will just seal just slightly better than this one. And I'll use some waterproof gasket sealant on the gasket also to waterproof it just a little bit more, just for added safety. Again, a millimeter gauge is what you'd use to do that. Once I've got that all done, I'm going to unscrew the crown that came with the watch movement. This is just a plastic shipping crown. We're going to use the stem that shipped with the watch, and we will add the case crown onto that stem. And of course the next step is to place the movement into the watch case and just kind of get a general idea of what it's going to look like. So I'm going to put the movement in, then I will put the spacer in, and then we will start fitting the crown and stem. I'm going to remove the weight wheel on this because I don't want that to get in my way while I'm working on the watch. The first thing we have to do is get that little screw out of there, then we'll take the weight off. Then the next step on this is to put the dial or the movement ring or the spacer ring in place. Once that's set up, then we can actually insert the stem and crown, and we can start fitting other things like the case screws to hold everything down in place. So here you can see I'm reinserting the crown, and then we can just do a quick test, make sure it winds and sets. And I like to do this step by step just to make sure that everything works correctly while I'm moving along. So guys, one of the considerations you're going to have to make when you purchase a watch like this or you get all the parts is that you may have to order some parts after you get everything in. For instance, this particular movement ring that holds the movement in place has a very large requirement for the case clips. These need to be I think about 6 millimeters in length, so you are going to make sure that you order the correct ones. So here I've got a set of extra long clips, and those I will put in place to hold the watch movement in place. These will fit on top of that brass spacer ring, and they will go into a groove within the inside of the watch case itself. Everything gets screwed together and it's held down in place so that the movement doesn't come loose or flop around inside. So one of the last things that we need to do while we're assembling the entire watch before we put the case back together is we have to trim down our stem. Now you can see I've got about 3 millimeters extra play, and how I determine that is I push in the pusher crown to see how much room I have left over when the crown taps out, and that way I know how much of the top of the stem to remove the threaded part so that when I rethread it into the crown, we can actually screw down the crown and get it to seal tight along the watch. So one of the things is you just have to be patient if you've never done this before. If you have done this before, you have experience on how to do it. It just takes a little time, pressure, and experience to get through it. And of course, if you did everything correctly, everything should fit properly, and you should be able to screw down the crown so that the gaskets make a nice tight seal on the watch case and the case tube. Okay guys, before I move any further, what I want to do is I just want to do a final test of this particular watch, and I'm going to do a beat test. I'm going to try to get this watch as accurate as possible since I don't want to open it up constantly to do this. Again, this is a very inexpensive Chinese watch movement. It is not going to be perfect. If I can get this thing within 3 to 5 seconds, I'm going to be ecstatic. So let's just see how well it turns out. Here's a little clip of my computer, and I'm just doing a simple test. Again, I'm not shooting for 100% perfect with this watch movement because I'm never going to achieve it. But I do want to just get it where it will work well. To add the winding weight back on and screw that down, I am going to just attach the fly weight and then screw it into position, and then we can put the back cover on the watch case. And once that weight's on there, we'll move on to the case. And the case back, so you know, uses a Rolex case back closer or opener to tighten this up tight. So I'm going to get the right bit, and I'm going to put this on my case back tightener. I'm going to tighten it down, and the next step is to throw the band on. Now, I love these rubber silicone bands. I use them all the time for my watches. They are waterproof. They hold up really well, and this particular one is black with a white inside, white stitching, and you can see it's got the white holes on the surface. They just look really cool, and they hold up, and they're a very durable band. So I'll put a link to these on eBay where you can get them, and that'll be from the website. So here's the end result, guys. This $103 watch is what it cost me to make this particular model. You know, if I could do things a little differently, I would. There are some things that you know, I just like and don't like about this, but it's a cool looking watch. If you like this video and you thought it was useful, please give it a thumbs up. If you're not a subscriber, please consider subscribing. It does help my channel grow. The more subscribers I get, seems to do better for the algorithm, and my videos show a little bit better. If you are looking for any of these parts, guys, please check out the links below or in the article for this particular watch build on my blog site, because I will have everything listed there where you can get everything and about how much it should cost or how long it should take. Thanks for watching, guys. Have a great day.